So I'm going to now ask Mr. Nick Birrell, Vice President, Industry Strategy with Oracle Utilities. I think we've been interestingly hearing a lot about O-Power acquisition and some of the projects, so welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you. My name is Nick Birrell, as I've been introduced. I'm Vice President for Industry Strategy at Oracle Utilities. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here. It's actually a real pleasure and a real honour, so thank you. I wanted to start off with a little bit of an anecdote first. So I was at a conference recently in the US, and it was a room full of network operators. So these guys, as you can imagine, all highly skilled, all very experienced people. And at the end of his speech, the floor was open up to questions, and one of the questions were, who knows people in the customer service organisation that you can work with when you have a customer experience issue around the network? And this room of talented and experienced network operated leaders sat back and no one could put their hand up. No one did. So I guess that shouldn't be terribly surprising, because for a long time, this is how utilities have been traditionally structured. Two separate streams running in parallel. The network op guys delivered safe, reliable power. The customer ops team dealt with the customer efficiently and very well. But these two sides of the one organisation, often even operating out of different buildings, is changing, even though many utilities look like this. And the reason why it's changing is because your customers are a huge driver of this. They're expecting more, and indeed at times they're even consuming less at the same time. But they're also becoming more active grid participants, not just through conservation and demand management, but also with distributed generation. And that creates challenges and opportunities that force us to think about how these two streams relate to one another. In fact, these two streams, we believe, are beginning to look like two sides of the same track, and they're coming together to look like this. This is the shape of the customer-centric utility operating a customer-centric grid. It's what we believe is how the utility of the future will look like. Customers with distributed energy resources, such as solar, are becoming active partners in operating your network. No longer are they just people who consume the product and pay the bill. This puts them right at the centre of your value chain and indeed at the centre of your operations. And that's what we mean by the customer-centric grid. For a utility shaped like this, it has a number of implications around your asset and network operations, your meter and customer operations, and your customer experience and demand-side management programs, because they're all closely linked now. And here is a great example of the customer-centric grid which I want to run you through, where the customer is at the centre. For this purpose, I will use a customer named Stacey to explain. So let's look up in the top left here. So firstly, Stacey, like many young people, decided to buy a new electric vehicle. She's really happy with that purchase. The first thing she thinks about is not to tell her utility, because that would be a little bit weird. So what she does, she might tell her mum, she might tell her friends, but the utility, no. After a while though, the utility, through its machine learning analytic programs, actually suspects that Stacey might be charging an electric vehicle from her property. Knowing this, the utility communicates with Stacey to confirm that do you have an EV there? Okay. And when they communicate with her, they make suggestions. Well, firstly, can you please confirm this? And also, would you be interested in shifting to a new rate? So perhaps a time of use rate, which is beneficial to the utility because it distributes the load across to a non-peak time, but it's also obviously beneficial to the customer because, in this case, Stacey is getting a reduced rate. So in receiving this communication, Stacey goes online, she looks at the various options for all the different tariffs from that utility and decides that the recommendation of the new time of use rate is a great one, so she signs up. Very soon, in her home energy report that she receives from the utility, Stacey looks at it and she's very happy, and that's because she does see that she's actually saving money. So she's happy and she's engaged. That's a great customer. The utility also has managed to shift load to a more preferred time. So the utility is happy as well. So we see the customer to network pathway at the top. Now, moving to the bottom of the diagram, we see that while the utility can typically manage the network load through such things as profiling and forecasting techniques, demand response is still needed on some peak days to balance the network. Now, engagement is key for customer demand response participation. So the utility reaches out to Stacey, who is beginning to think of her utility now as a trusted advisor. So it's a really good relationship that's being developed. And she signs up for the demand response event. Okay. The next day after the event, Stacey receives her home energy report. It indicates that she's reduced power, but also received a rebate as well. So once again, she's happy, and once again, the utility is happy because they've managed to spread their load out. So it's all good. So the point that that's the network to customer. So the point that there's 2 points that I want to point out here. Firstly, at all stages, customer engagement is the key to this. The customer is at the centre of the grid. And also, I might add, the value chain. So, customer relationships are evolving. I think we all know that. I think that's been the subject of many of the topics today. One thing we're witnessing is this evolution for customer relationships within utility. What started off as a purely transactional one where utilities might you get a bill from utilities, you pay it, very transactional. In fact, some utilities at some stage didn't even know the name of the customer. They were just simply known as whatever the property address was. But this has obviously slowly evolved into one where the customer is increasingly central. And this obviously started off with such things like 360-degree views of the customer and the ability to serve them via multiple channels. It's then evolved into the ability to really provide real insights into things like usage patterns and the ability to provide next best actions for the customer, such as best payment methods. Many utilities, of course, are still on this journey. But the most customer-focused advanced utilities are now moving to a new model, one of a trusted advisor. In this model, utilities are entrusted by the customer to advise them on complex energy decisions. However, the key, of course, is knowing when customers want that advice, and that's the key. Bombarding the customer with advice with no real purpose is not effective. In fact, it's probably annoying for the customer. So quality always beats quantity in this regard. So let's do a little exercise. Firstly, can I ask everyone to put their hand up, please? Thank you. I see not everyone's put their hand up, but hey, that's fine. That sometimes people don't want to participate in a customer engagement program, so that's perfectly a reasonable situation. Now, please leave your hand up if you read all the marketing emails you receive. Oh, geez, so everyone's put their hand down. I had about 5 other permutations. Normally when I do this, I get through at least 3 of them. So the point that I want to make here is that when we are bombarded with communications on a daily basis, okay? So once again, quality is better than quantity. Many of them that we ignore these because we feel they add very little value. And this, I might add, is reinforced in our research, which found that the average utility customer receives 40 communications from the utility every year. Now, 40, that seems like a lot to me, okay? But the other surprising fact was that 72% of these customers felt like they still needed more communications from the utility. You know, what does that mean? So 40 comms per year, but still they wanted more. So we did a bit more digging, and the key insight was lots of communications doesn't necessarily mean customers are getting the info they need, and that's the key point, okay? To effectively engage your customers, to change how they consume energy, interact with you and feel about you, you don't need to tell them about the great service you're providing. You don't need to create new reasons to contact them. And you certainly don't need to bombard them with generic marketing material. Instead, focus on the moments that matter most to your customers. These are the moments when your customer wants your input and advice, where you get the biggest bang for your customer engagement budget. And these up here are the moments that matter as discovered through our research. Your utility might have some other moments that matter the most, but these are the ones that we've identified. Many of these, of course, are not surprising, And the graphic, let's face it, is relatively simple, but implementing these experiences for each of these moments and making these interactions valuable with your customer is anything but simple. And this is where an organisation like Oracle Utilities, with some of our applications, can help. For example, saying welcome to a new customer. Just think of each of the touch points and the variance associated with each moment. Now pick one of these touch points and remember, different customers have different channel preferences. Each channel needs a slightly different experience because the content and the interaction pattern is different for every channel. And now remember that different segments of customers have different needs. So for instance, a high-income homeowner is very different to a college student renting an apartment, as an example. And if you don't treat them uniquely, customers won't pay attention and you have less influence over their decision-making. And finally, to make interaction really effective, you have to personalise it. I just don't mean by putting up a customer name on a standard letter form on that one. So now, imagine each moment multiplied by every touch point, each channel, each segment, and personalised to every customer. As you can imagine, this is a great challenge from a technical and a business process perspective, putting the customer at the centre of everything. So in summary, our research does show that people respond to messages that they feel are tailored towards them. Everyone likes to feel special after all. So now I want to share with you a bit more about our research and what we've done. And what we've primarily identified are 5 what we call universal truths about the utility customer. So over the years, we've conducted about 54,000 interviews, not all by me, across 8 years, across 10 countries, and the following 5 themes, as discussed before, have emerged. They can help utilities better engage with their customers. So, number 1, customers, let's face it, they're not satisfied with utilities. And sorry to break that news to you all here, if that was new, but it doesn't seem like we are popular. So we have to make sure your engagement has purpose and value to the customer. Number 2 that we found, everyone wants to reduce their energy spend. But you know what? They ain't too sure how to do this. So for smart utilities, this is a key area where they can get involved by becoming a trusted advisor, by offering advice how to reduce their spend. Number 3, people expect personalised information and tools from utilities. They want to be empowered, they want advice, and they want good advice, not just any old advice. Fourthly, consumers want multiple forms of outreach from their customers. They do have preferences of how they want to be communicated. This will change with different types of communications. The way you send, the way you receive a notice about a projected late bill, you might want to receive a text for that. But however, the way you receive the actual bill itself is going to be a different channel. And finally, everyone pays attention to how they compare to others. Okay? So this especially helps if you want to modify energy consumption patterns. So, one more bit for me. I want to leave you with how we at Oracle incorporate these truths into our customer engagement design philosophy. It's quite simple. 1, if our goal at Oracle Utilities is to help change human behaviour, we need to understand how it works. And so for this, we make sure all our UX team study behavioural science. 2, you are boring until proven otherwise. And once again, I'm sorry about that. There's been studies done out there that the average customer spends 9 minutes per year thinking about the utilities. So you have to make sure that 9 minutes is a positive 9 minutes. Point 3, don't show or tell a customer something just because you can. It needs to lead to an action, okay? And make that action obvious, rightio? So for instance, if you want to tell them to switch plans, tell them that. And they might be led to that action. Fourthly, think long-term, not short-term, and your customer engagement strategies should be focused in getting long-term customers. And point 5, incorporate diversity in your design. All sorts of people, of all backgrounds, of all of all different income types, of all different ages, need to get service from your utility. So remember this, and you'll service them all well. So hopefully I've imparted some wisdom that guides our customer engagement strategies at Oracle Utilities. It's been great to speak to you today, and by all means, if you want to continue the conversation, we have a booth upstairs, so please come along and talk to us. Thank you.